Hello and welcome to Full Disclosure, a podcast project designed to let me spend more time than I'd ever get on the radio with interesting people. And this week's guest, James Blunt, certainly fits into that category. Welcome.
Thanks, I'm touched and flattered. Thank you very much.
Well, it's a long list even before we get started. To the bits that people know about, singer-songwriter, former British Army officer, social media legend, we now add memoirist, and you're back on the road imminently as well, so a busy time.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm really excited to be back on the road. You know, it's a child's game, a young man and your young woman's game. And so I go and sleep on a bus with 16 men. There are 2 buses, 5 trucks, and we live like a travelling troupe, and do what we love.
We'll start at the very beginning, which you're 50 next month.
40.
Oh, I see. I was warned that there was
lies
wiggle room on the chronology.
I do change my Wikipedia page.
So I gathered.
Yeah.
Why not? I thought you weren't allowed to. I thought that they could tell if you did it, and they'd check out the.
Which my mother changes it back.
Does it back?
Okay. She has the alert on it. But yeah, it's the joys of Wikipedia is you can edit your own page. So when the ego's there.
A friend of mine has a colostomy bag that isn't real. That's been on his Wikipedia page for years. Yes, I don't know why he's not.
So I added things like, actually, it was part of an interview. They asked about Prince William and Kate's wedding.
Yes.
And then I said I was the church organ player, and that's been part of my Wikipedia page at the wedding.
We'll get on to your sort of interesting relationship with things that other people think are very serious and you tend not to. But I'm interested in your peripatetic childhood, a military family, dad in the army, helicopter pilot. So nowhere really was home, I don't imagine, in your early years.
Yeah, we did that typical thing of being a pat brat that I would move around every 2 years. And so I was brought up in Cyprus, Hong Kong, Germany, as far and exotic as a field as Yorkshire. And then I suppose we'd arrive on an army patch and my mum would literally kick me and my sister out of the door and say, go and find some friends. And we'd knock on doors and say to people, do you have anyone our age who we could play with?
Which was normal, though, that you wouldn't be the only people knocking on their doors.
Exactly that. And you're there for 2 years, that you have a best friend for 2 years, and then you move on and you never see them again in your life.
Were you conscious that not everybody else lived like that?
No, that was our way of life and really comfortable with that.
Yes.
I'm comfortable having no friends now. We just move on. And perhaps, as I say, if you do that every 2 years, I'm now a touring musician and live on the road. I get itchy feet if I'm in a place for too long.
Do you?
Yeah.
This could have gone the opposite way, I suppose. You could have really craved security and stability.
I like to move around, and so touring is fun. And even where I live, I don't try not to live in one place.
Just the two, just you and your sister growing up, was it?
Yeah, my parents had a mistake later on. As a third child, her name is Daisy because she was Whoops-a-Daisy. But she's 11 years younger, and only became useful to me actually in later life when I'd ruined my reputation with anyone my own generation, and she introduced me to my now wife.
I have this image then of you being very high energy, running around the place. Probably, I presume there was an element of hero worship, was there, with your father? Or
absolutely, and I still do. I mean, he's an amazing human being. Much more charming gentleman than I've ever managed to be, and a good human being, and say an army helicopter pilot was really amazing. He'd come and visit school, and
it's a bit more impressive than other people's dads.
Yeah, landed an army helicopter, and that was definitely a moment.
And then the first place where you had any sense of permanence then would have been prep school.
Yeah, exactly. But that was a weird moment, being dropped off at a boarding school. I was 7 years old.
But it would always be the destination. Did you know from an early age that you would be going to boarding school at some point?
I think my parents, when they're teaching children to say various words, I think the first words they taught me were boarding school. But I think it was certainly it was a shock to the system. They gave me a Nintendo Game & Watch, Donkey Kong it was, and I realised something was up because it wasn't Christmas, right, and it wasn't my birthday, and they'd given me this expensive present, and then they drove me to a school. I sat there on a sofa with some other children playing on this Donkey Kong, and then they put their head around the corner and said goodbye.
We're off now.
And 3 days later I asked the matron, hey, when am I going to see my parents? This was in early September, and the matron said, Christmas time, and it certainly came as a surprise.
And were they overseas?
They're based in Germany, yeah.
So I mean, it's a proper wrench, isn't it? And at 7, apart from military families, we're a similar age. Well, depending, of course, on what age you are today. But that's the last generation, really, where 7, fully boarding at 7 was relatively normal. And it was, by that time, it was pretty only much military families who would...
Yeah, I would think so. And I think my own thinking now that I'm a family man with children is I wouldn't want to send my children to boarding school because I would miss out on them.
Yes.
I'm sure they'd have a beneficial time, but I wouldn't get the pleasure of their company.
No, and you don't know. I mean, it's normal. Our parents did it for the best imaginable reasons.
Definitely.
The way the world was ordered meant that it did give you untold advantages, and it was largely unquestioning that
Absolutely.
Like the beginning of a conveyor belt.
And as you were saying, it is stability. Rather than moving to new schools every 2 years, I was in the same school, and it was giving me huge opportunity.
So what were you like at school?
I can't remember.
Rubbish.
I think...
What were you good at?
I can be an intense human being with certain things. I have intense friendships, intense. If I'm diving in on a project of any kind, I'm heavy into that. But I'm a joker as well, and don't take much that seriously when I'm asked.
Yes. So, I mean, I'm just trying to imagine where that balance lies. That kind of... Would you have taken things more seriously if you hadn't had to learn at a very early age not to?
No, I suppose you probably have to learn that along the way. My mother always said I was a serious child.
Did she?
Yeah. And you can get that in my songs. I have very earnest songs.
Yes.
So that's obviously the
And you go much deeper in your songs than you ever do in your interviews.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Just get that out of the way
early.
And
it's best that way.
We're not going to be making an exception to that rule today,
No.
I don't think. But well, tell me a little bit more. I mean, you'd play a lot of sport, presumably. It would still be quite strict. Were you in the final days of corporal punishment when you were at prep school, or did you just miss out on that?
I learned to enjoy the beatings and buggery.
You're doing it already.
Volunteer for those kind of things. It was... when I moved to Harrow, we had an amazing setup. It was a system called fagging.
Yes.
I had
still there, was it? Just
it was illegal.
Right.
It wasn't legal. It was banned, but it still took place. I had a guy in the top year. I had to call him God. I almost didn't know his real name. I had to turn up every morning, wake him up, open his curtains, bring him tea, make him toast, change his sheets, do his laundry, and on the weekends he'd give me cigarettes and beer. And he paid me £15 a term, which was actually 5 quid more than anyone else. And also, if I got in trouble with any other seniors, he would kind of help you get out of that trouble. So it was a mutually beneficial setup, and I kind of liked it.
Were you ever a rebel?
Yeah.
What did you rebel against, and how?
I managed to get a cow into the school courtyard one night.
That's not rebelling. That's pranking, isn't it?
Okay,
did you have a problem with authority? Because I'm thinking you presumably decided quite early on you wanted to follow your father into the army.
Yeah, no, I'm institutionalized,
Yes.
and I don't think I would follow the institution, definitely. But I think, like most human beings, I try and do things that are outside the rules. I think my father's sound advice was just don't get caught.
Don't get caught. How did you get a cow into the school?
It was quite difficult, really. First, you've got to catch the cow. But fortunately, they sleep at night. So that was the moment. It was in the middle of the night.
What were you like academically, James?
I think my schoolmaster, my headmaster, pulled me in to give me a bollocking at some stage and told me that I was an Alfa Romeo.
Go on.
He said, "You're not a Ferrari." And at the time, I really liked, Alfa Romeos. Little did I know that they break down a lot, don't they? And it wasn't necessarily the compliment I thought it was.
So a medium, a B, C stream.
Some A's, some B's and some C's mixed in.
And what were you, at that age, what were you dreaming of? What did you want to be when you grow up? And what sort of, was it already the army? Was it always the army?
I knew I was going to join the army mainly because they'd help with the school fees and
But that wasn't a prerequisite. By the time you go to university, you get the scholarship and then...
Yes, so I had to pay them back. So I was definitely something that was open to me.
Yes.
But from 14, I was saying I'm going to be a musician.
Okay.
I was telling everyone I'm going to be a musician. I was writing songs. But also, how are you going to become a musician? I don't know anyone. My dad can't help me with that. And as the years go by and I start owing the army money through a scholarship later through university, then I have to pay them back. You can give them the money back if you've still saved the money.
It's still quite a lot
my
of money.
my parents had used all the money in slot machines in Andover, so I was compelled to then join the army.
So where did the music come from? Was there music at home?
Yeah,
on your travels.
Yeah, my mother was musical. She says that her mother was musical. We could sing from an early age, and I remember people saying, "You can sing," you know. That, and my mother made me learn the violin from a very early age.
Were you good at it?
I just remember the setup, really. We were playing hot cross buns with a group of other children around a table with a hot cross bun on it. And on reflection, it was, we were probably involved in some kind of satanic ritual. But it was the 70s. So
yes.
that was rampant at that stage. But it gave me a thirst for music. And then I learned piano, simple grades, nothing fancy. But all of it was a parent doing the best for their child, or saying, hey, school does this, and if you can have a little taste of music, it's good for the soul.
Like the inner life.
It's good for the soul in some way. And when I hit 14, which is when we as children become independent thinkers, that's when I started having my own ideas. The struggles of being an individual, have my own ideas, and that's when music suddenly became really important. I if I'm honest, I actually really hated boarding school by that stage. At Harrow, it's an all-boys school. It's a ridiculous place as it was. I will be sending my children there so they know my pain. But I didn't enjoy it, and so music was a great outlet, a place I could put my thoughts and ideas.
And you would write quite emotional songs. I know you still do, but presumably at 14, that combination of adolescent angst and loneliness.
Well, just questions of life.
And this would be on the guitar, not the violin.
Yes, piano and guitar at that stage.
Okay.
We when we grow up, we just don't know who we're going to be, and they're precious to be someone. I was the eldest child, precious to achieve something and be someone, provide for a family. Those kind of questions are
already
ridiculous.
At 14.
Well, you're just definitely thinking about who you're.
Yes.
Who
Well,
you're
not
gonna
everybody
be
is,
and what you're going to do.
Yes.
And so I suppose that's what I was writing about, and then also really enjoying it. And thought, actually, this is genuinely what I'm going to do and be in the future.
So you were kind enough to yourself to think that you were quite good at it?
Well, I didn't have much to compare myself against, I suppose. There aren't many. Fortunately, if you're at a boarding school, everyone's wanting to be a lawyer, yes. or nowadays, for my kind of boarding school, a politician.
Yes.
So not many people were saying they wanted to be a musician.
You would know, wouldn't you? If you were rubbish, you'd know if you were sounding like writing absolute crap and not even addressing the questions that you were trying to address in your own songs.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Because this is really I find this very interesting. I'm a huge fan of yours, by the way, and have been for a very long time, and almost sort of felt pain on your behalf when some other people in your line of work were very mean about you, very mean to you. But your music, and I'm not embarrassed to say, I find it very moving, and that's a sign of seriousness.
Absolutely,
that is a sign of deep thinking and deep feeling, and I know we've touched on the fact that you prefer to leave it all on the page, as it were, rather than in life. But an unhappy 14-year-old writing songs at boarding school is not how people would necessarily imagine you of having been.
And I'm thrilled for it. I'm thrilled for the opportunity. In many ways, Harrow School, I when I'm not in an interview and talking about it, I would say it makes you either a sheep or it makes you an individual.
Yes.
And I think for me, I didn't follow the crowd.
It
I went
did
the
make
other
you an
way,
individual.
and I'm happy to be an individual. And at the end of the day, most things, there's no pot of gold where the crowd have gone.
No.
In whether it be financial pot of gold or whether it be almost spiritual too, it's going to be going your own path and your own journey to think freely and be an individual.
Fulfillment you're describing, really,
exactly.
And unlikely to find that if you're an identikit old Harrovian.
Yes, exactly.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Were you bullied?
No, I mean, actually, well, at times, yes. I was.
Right.
I say no as my first reaction because
we all do. And then our arm flies up in the air.
Well, everyone at some stage is.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Everyone had the one weekend where they had the crap kicked out of them.
Like Buggins' turn, as opposed to
Exactly.
term after term after term. Of
exactly. And do you remember those moments? Absolutely. Do I still remember those people? Yeah. Those moments live with you.
But it wasn't a defining feature of your school
No, it wasn't.
days.
I mean, I definitely remember the herd.
Yes.
And not wanting to be in the herd and not needing to be in the herd.
Right.
And I'm happier that way.
Okay. And how did you do academically at Harrow? Did you? I mean, were you still in Alfa Romeo, or did you find some new gears? Were you?
Yeah, I
got some alloys.
I got myself some A levels. I got to university. I went to Bristol. I studied aerospace manufacturing engineering there, which I couldn't spell.
Well, look, you're doing it again. You don't end up studying aerospace manufacturing engineering by accident, do you?
And I love that because again, I managed to get the pilot's license when I was 16.
Okay.
Again, paid for by the government.
Was that with the CCF?
That was an RAF scholarship.
So you're in Chipmunks.
Exactly that, which were great fun planes to fly. And so, there I was thinking, I'm going to join the army, potentially fly. Now I'm doing aerospace manufacturing engineering. I'll build planes as well. And somewhere along the line, I'll be a musician.
Right. But it was always there. It was always.
And then I bailed out of aerospace manufacturing engineering because it was a course of 170 men and 3 girls. And I thought it was time to change. And I changed to sociology, which was 170 girls and 3 boys.
But they're not obvious bedfellows, are they?
No.
Aerospace manufacturing and sociology. Did you know what? Because this is around we're of a generation where that advert, that British Telecom.
Exactly. I've got a degree in a science.
You've got an ology.
I've got an ology.
You've got an ology.
In sociology. And by the way, that advert is totally right. It's absolute rubbish. It's a rubbish degree, and one shouldn't have it. But it was a fantastic few years at university.
For all of the usual, but none of the
right reasons. Yeah.
Yes, exactly that. So the ambition to be a musician was never challenged, laughed at. I mean, did you tell your parents? Presumably thought, "Oh, he'll grow out of it." Did they?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you didn't. I'm interested in this because you started at 14, which was earlier than I expected, and it's still with you by the time you get to Bristol. You just somewhere in the back of your mind, that you are going to have a crack at it one day.
Not even have a crack at it. I was going to be a successful.
You're going to pull it off.
I was going to be a successful professional musician, and I would say it probably is the defining feature of most successful people is they really know what they're going to do and are so convinced of their own success that they don't question that, and that is, some would call it confidence.
Yes.
For me, I recognise it as beautiful naivety.
Yes.
And I've been fortunate enough to tour with Ed Sheeran, and I see exactly the same in him. Just, of course, he's going to succeed. There's no doubt of the conviction, and it's the same in most jobs. The guy who is the leader is the guy who just really believes we're going down a path and there's no need to question it. It's going to work out. As an army officer, you have to be the idiot who stands up in front of a whole load of blokes from all corners of the UK and say, we're going to stand up out of this trench and we're going to run towards that machine gun post. And they're all going to go, no bloody way. So that's idiotic. But you're the guy saying, no, come on. For these, bizarre institutions, we'll do it, but that conviction is what people will follow.
I have to nudge you back then to because it's not good just having self-belief. By the time you get through your A-levels and you're heading off to university and you've still got the belief, it must by now be backed up by...
Yeah, well, you've got to do a bit of practice.
You've played your songs to people.
You've got to do a bit of practice.
I don't think you did a gig until you left the army.
No, but I was that irritating guy at a party with a guitar.
Right.
But that guy at the party you'll normally really cringe at, don't you, and just wish they would not do it. And I feel pain when I look back. But people seem to listen and they seem to be excited.
Is there any period of your life that you like talking about? Because you don't really like talking about school. I know you don't particularly like talking about the army. Did we reach the bit after...
Well, I do. I'm really, I do talk about the army with enthusiasm.
Yes, but I mean, you don't. You don't want to talk about the nastier elements of it for obvious reasons.
Yeah. Again, I suppose because in their conversations that are, I suppose, in some way private that you and I could have off microphone, but they're quite ugly.
So you keep a very clear distinction between James Blunt, the public figure, and James Blunt, the private figure, in a way that not all famous people do.
Definitely. Soldiers are involved in the ugliest side of human nature. We don't choose our soldiers to be the nicest people. Our frontline troops are shock troops, and they're involved in acts of terrible, terrible violence. But they're on our side, and we use them, and we need them.
Yes.
Lots of that is kept in some way hidden, isn't it, from the public, because
Of course
it's very
it has to be.
because it's very, very ugly. And what we were witness to more than party to
Okay.
witness to in Kosovo was humans at its absolute worst, and
Yes.
to describe that, to describe what we saw, is too much, really.
Yes.
It's you know it's
I know you have in the past. I've got no interest in pushing you to do so again, but I wonder if you'd let me ask how that squared with the very introspective 14-year-old that you've described, the one who's questioning, because you know your tennis and ours is not to reason why, ours is just to do or die, and yet the 14-year-old you described was someone who was questioning everything. I wonder how those two sides of your personality coexisted.
Yeah, I mean, I think within the army you can still live within a set of rules.
Yes.
But you are, particularly the British Army, still allowed to think for yourself. Okay. The American Army or the Russian Army is so big that they just they try and win by sheer weight of numbers, whereas we know that we can't in the British Army. The Scandinavian Army thinks the same way. They teach you to use your brain. So they give you a mission and then say how you're going to do the mission is up to you to a degree, and you are allowed to a degree, question the means in which you are going to achieve your goal.
Oh yeah, I understand, because actually, in a way, joining the army, to people who are listening to this now, might be thinking, well, hang on, that sounds like joining the herd, and I thought you said you were someone who didn't want to join the herd, but I think you've just made sense of that. So you felt you had a degree of autonomy within the institution.
Yeah, and you know the things I was involved in, though sometimes terrible, you know, it's very much an exciting way of life.
Sure.
And there's freedom of thought. You know, if you can still do the right thing in that context and still have a notion that I'm going to try and bring what am I trying to say? We're given certain tasks, and there's a political angle from it, but there's also your moral angle on it. You know, we're in Kosovo where two peoples were murdering. To not jump in the middle and stop two peoples murdering, it would be inhuman in its first place. We should, you know, get involved and say, this is unacceptable. And there's acts of genocide that were going on. To try and stop that was the right thing to do. And that's not about being in the army. It's just being about being a human. I was given certain tasks, and when I disagreed with them, I and my soldiers would discuss how we were going to do it differently. I was asked to clear weapons out of a number of villages. And if we took their weapons, they would have nothing to defend themselves with. Yeah. So we would then be their security. I was promised that I could do this. I would be there long term, and I told the men folk of that village, I will be here long term for you. I've had assurances from my commanders, and when I got their weapons eventually, when they trusted me enough to give me their weapons, the very next day I was given the instruction to leave those villages and go elsewhere, completely breaking down those promises. I spoke to my soldiers. I said, this is, I think this is unacceptable. I think we should leave half of us back here going against our instructions. Who's with me? You don't normally take a vote in the army, but you know, and they said, we're with you on that. So half of us went and did the new job. Half of us remained doing what we'd promised people that we would do, look after this village. Right. 2 weeks later, a different area, not part of my area of responsibility, had done the same thing. Their weapons had been taken off them. We had moved away from that area. All of them were murdered. Entire villages were murdered. My bosses called me up and said, get back to your area. And I said, actually,
I've left some people.
Screw you. We've been there. So you know, yeah, we were still felt confident enough to use our own minds as necessary.
How much trouble would you have got into if things had unfolded differently?
I mean, definitely a certain amount of trouble. But if you're following what you feel is right,
yes,
then I think you'll still be able to stand up in whatever court-martial situation it was and say, I was doing what I felt was the right thing.
But you were conscious that would be a consequence, a potential consequence.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's an act of rebellion then?
Yeah, thanks. I'll take one.
Well, it's more impressive than the cow.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And Kosovo, I guess, morally and ethically, is a clearer cut case than some of the engagements that followed.
Absolutely. We had long-term commitments in Kosovo. Because of Afghanistan, we upped ship and left. And Kosovo probably has struggled because we moved too quickly. I actually went back to Kosovo to do a documentary.
This was in about 2006, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I really thought I was going to kind of go back and have cheering crowds, and it'd be a wonderful moment. that village that I'm talking about where I took the weapons, I'd handed over to some Danes who had handed over to some Russians, and little did I know the Russians had just upped and left. And when I took this camera crew back up the hill to this beautiful village, and literally I'd become very close to these people. We had a very trusting relationship, and as we approached, we saw there were no cars there. As we got closer, we realised there was no glass in the windows, and then no window frames, and entire villages were deserted. And you know what had happened. You know, the Russians had gone, and sure enough, people had come in and started, taking one or two people out, and then eventually everyone said, "This is, unmanageable and undefendable. Let's go." And we are responsible for that. So whilst I think Kosovo was the right place to be,
yes.
Long term, when you get involved, it's a long term commitment.
Well, it's a recurring theme.
But our politics is very short term.
Precisely that, and not there for the aftermath. I think my research might be wrong, but you commanded 30,000 troops at one point.
I didn't command them.
No, I didn't think so.
No, I led them. I was probably
still. What's the difference, just for laymen or for civilians listening? What's the difference between leading and commanding? Is that the commander tells you where to lead them?
I was at the front. Follow me. I'm not the one in charge of them. I was in charge of 5 small tanks called scimitars, which looks like a tank, but it's mice. I'm a smaller human being for your listeners. So it's a mini tank, and so I probably had 15. Of us, but then as we crossed the border into Kosovo itself, having bombed the Serbs into an agreement, then we had this column of 30,000 people. There was a little argument as to who would lead, and a brigadier said, "Hey, you put me at the front," and I found myself leading 30,000 people up to Pristina airport, and it was the most amazing day of my life. Yes. And huge pressure, because if you're 30,000 people following you in the most enormous column, you're just thinking, God, if I turn right when I'm supposed to have gone left, this is going to be embarrassing. But fortunately, my map reading skills are okay.
It is, and I know that it's hard when you've lived it to acknowledge it, but you have some sense, I think. Also, this does come across in your book, where I should say you do touch on some of the really horrible stuff that happened to you, particularly in Kosovo. You do have a sense of the extraordinary, or the absurdity of the extraordinary nature of your life.
The absurdity too.
Yes, okay.
And that's why
I think you can use that word. I should.
Yeah, thank you. And that's why I can laugh at, the whole thing. It's mad.
Yes.
Mad to go from that, where humans are killing each other over nothingness. That's what we do as humans.
Yes.
We kill each other over the differences in the way we worship a non-existent God. Is for me extraordinary. And then after that, I can come back and be the Queen's ceremonial bodyguard. All of it's bizarre, to spend hours polishing boots for tourists to stick their phone numbers down.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
I had no idea. So naive.
Is worth signing up for.
It's a bit late, mate.
Is a madness. You've come from a war zone, and there you are as a decorative piece.
If you spent too long thinking about it, you'd go mad. So there's a bit of action versus contemplation, presumably.
Mad in what way?
Well, mad in terms of thinking, why am I polishing my boots now? And I was doing, last year, I was, doing the worst imaginable side of soldiering.
Yeah, absolutely. We found, hey, so it's a fantastic posting, because you've left a war zone.
Yes,
you're based in London. For the time you're getting yourself dressed and ready, the rest of the time you're in London, and as soldiers don't get that opportunity very much.
No, fair enough.
And it was amazing. I'd roll out of nightclubs at 6 a.m. and then go and ride around Hyde Park and down past Buckingham Palace and see my friends falling out of the same nightclubs that I'd come out of.
I like the idea. I mean, and then of course, as everybody knows, you ended up playing a prominent part in the funeral of the Queen Mother. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Can I go back to Sandhurst briefly? Did you enjoy it more than you enjoyed school, more than you enjoyed Harrow?
No, Sandhurst was hell on earth. The worst year of my life.
It's a recurring theme here.
Absolutely. I have. That's why I have all this inspiration for miserable songs. And that's why I highly recommend anyone who has children, send them to boarding school, and they can potentially become a pop star. No, God, it's miserable. Literally, you're taken from university or school, but university in particular, where I was, free. No more school. No more all boys school. I'm suddenly in this incredible living in a flat with my mates where we could go out and beer is cheap in university towns, and the work is remarkably little, isn't it? 6 hours a week, I think, if you're doing sociology, 36 hours a week if you're doing aerospace and manufacturing engineering. And then you're taken to Sandhurst with an ironing board under your hand. They march you round at breakneck speed, literally someone screaming at you, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, until you get to your things. And your room that you sleep in is a prison cell where you have to fold the bed sheets down, measured with a Bible, iron them into place. It takes 45 minutes to make your bed as immaculately as it needs to be. So long, in fact, that you're not going to sleep on your bed, so you sleep on the floor beside your bed. The curtains for the inspection in the morning have to be folded and onto the windowsill, but pleated first in an immaculate manner. So you're not going to close them either. That's going to take time. So really, and your clothes themselves are hanging in the cupboard, are an inch apart, ironed into place. It's a work of art, but a prison cell too. And there you are on the floor in this immaculate room, and someone in the morning storms in. You stand to attention in your underwear, and they will put their finger over the windowsill, find some dust that wasn't my dust, it was their dust, from their house probably, throws open the window and throws the contents of your room out of the window, and you say, thank you, sir.
What's that designed to do?
It's designed in some way to break you and
so they can remold you.
But instead, for me, you just start to learn the ridiculousness of this whole thing. I mean, I have an attention to detail that was probably teaching me. My house is immaculate at home. It's quite hard for the children because even they have to stand in certain spaces. But so it definitely taught me that. But you learn to laugh at it.
But not everybody does. I mean, some people.
But we really did get through with you. You have some people who struggle,
right,
and others who find. And I did write in my book. My best friend, hearing him being inspected one day, they tore his sheets off his bed, and then they started pointing at a stain in his mattress and said, "What's that?" And he just, barked out loud, "It's jizz, sir." Everyone down the corridor is then just in absolute hysterics of laughter. You've just taken the fear out of the barking.
So, I mean, again, the question of why you carried on. I mean, you couldn't leave school, but you could have left Sandhurst. I know you'd have to have paid some money back, but was there a tension there? Would you have done if you'd won the lottery? Would you have left?
I don't think I could have done it psychologically because my father had been was in the army, and to have left would have let him down.
Right. And you carry that
very much, and I felt that of course I can get through this because my dad has, but also I must get through this because it would be such a letdown for him. Amazingly, actually, one of my closest friends left halfway through. He just upped at sticks and went. His father was also a colonel in the army, and the courage that took to do that, and it wasn't because he wasn't able to do it. He just said, "I'm not enjoying this. I'm out of here." And then he actually just went straight and joined the SAS as a soldier instead.
Right. So no one's going to question his valor,
but his father has never forgiven him, and has always said, and has said, well, you're a soldier, not an officer.
Okay.
And it's totally, and you think, hang on, this guy's achieved huge amounts, more than I ever have, or his father has as a colonel. That we put ourselves under these weird psychological and very meaningless pressures.
Well, meaningless pressures, but you're describing class, aren't you? Which is something that became quite relevant to your existence a little later. But we're still ahead of ourselves. You don't make colonel, you make captain.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I sense just in the context of this relatively brief encounter that you were planning on leaving. Yeah,
very much. And at that stage, I told you I'd already been telling people I was going to be a musician. Yes. I was, telling everyone and everyone every day.
Creating pressure for yourself.
Very much so.
Right, yes.
And at some stage, people said, "Please, just leave and go and do this." Really had talked myself into a corner, and I think that was a necessary, part before you jump. And so I marched into my commanding officer's office, chucked up a salute, whacked down a demo CD and said, I'm off to be a musician. And he said, "You're an idiot. Good luck."
What did your mates think? Did they? I mean, because this is where I'm not going to accept modesty, which is clearly not false modesty, but people around you must at some point during this period or previously have said to you, "Do you know what? I think you might make it." Yeah,
it's not a business that anyone.
No, but still, everyone listens to music. Everyone listens to music, and someone could say, "You're as good as the people on the radio." Well, better. That must have happened. Mustn't it?
Well, I think I don't know if they'd heard enough of my music or whether they listened enough on the radio to know what was actually going on. But I think they really knew that I was going that way, and I was determined to do that. And why would I then not succeed with such, as I say, blind conviction?
So what were you doing with the CD? Were you asking your commanding officer for permission to go and do a couple of gigs?
I didn't need to do that actually, because in the evenings
you could go off and do what you want.
I'd leave the barracks if I wasn't on duty, and I'd go and play in these North London bars, trying to at that stage get a record deal, which was the wrong approach. But instead,
but you knew nothing.
I knew nothing, so I'm just inviting record labels down and being rejected at that stage. But I'm still doing this process of small gigs to small numbers of people, and mainly my mates, posh girls from Chelsea, sitting on the floor on pashminas.
At the Water Rats in King's Cross
exactly,
was the first one.
Exactly.
So that was the first, apart from sort of bonfires and friends' estate.
Yeah, but it was a real learning process.
And nothing happened that made you think, oh dear, I'm not so sure about this actually. At every point, your resolve stiffened.
Very, very much so. It was, that's probably the hard graft.
Yes.
We talk about these TV shows of the X Factor and The Voice and the struggle that these young guys and girls have coming on these shows, and it's all exploding. Actually, to play in front of 5 people it's really intense. You can see the whites of everyone's eyes.
And this is where you find out whether you've got self-belief or whether you've just got a slightly eccentric ambition.
Yeah, exactly that. And you can hone your stagecraft.
Yes.
Just the way you are between songs. You're using shitty equipment, and so at least at that stage you can then you're doing your research into what your business. You're becoming, you're doing the time. So
are you approaching it with a sense of I don't want to say military precision because that's too much of a cliche, but you are thinking constantly about.
I at that stage was just thinking about. I was just thinking about a record deal,
right?
Really at that stage, and then some things. I became more educated along the way.
Okay.
And which is that people were saying. I met some people. They took me in and recorded demos, and they made better demos than I was doing myself.
Okay.
And they also
that's
said,
other people showing faith in you.
Exactly
now.
that. And so I'm starting to meet. I've come from the army. I've come from boarding school. I don't know anyone in the music business. And at this stage, I start to meet people in the industry, and I start to meet good, talented people who I really think are the guys who gave me that background, teaching me how to complete a song idea into a finished song.
Right.
I don't know what a middle eight is at that stage.
Okay.
What is a middle eight? To your listeners, they won't know what a middle eight probably is. And a middle eight's that it's instead of a third verse, you twist the chords around a little, and it's a middle eight sounds different.
So it's technique. It's technicality.
It's a technicality
you've
of a song.
You've got the raw material of a good song, and you need someone to come along and polish it.
Exactly. How just to keep
And what songs were you doing at this point? No Bravery must have been quite early on in your repertoire.
Yeah, obviously No Bravery. So I probably had half of my first album when I left the army. And even if they at that stage weren't completed songs, they were definitely the backbones of a song.
And what were you living? I mean, were you
So I'm still in the army at the stage doing my gigs and shows, and then someone said, "Hey, listen, don't go and call these record labels. You only get one shot.
A management company.
You get one shot with a record label,
right?
And they need everything to be in place. You need to go and find a manager, the right manager.
Yes.
And I discuss this often when anyone says, "How do you get into the music business?" And I say, "Get the right manager."
Yes.
And so we invited, me and these guys I met in some musicians. That anyone who had any contacts invite some management down. And I was passing CDs around, and I got a phone call from a guy who had just listened to my CD in his car. He was Elton John's day-to-day manager.
Yeah.
So that means it's kind of effectively the junior manager. There's a senior manager and a junior manager, and he was Elton's junior manager. He called me and said, "I've heard your CD and I'd love to meet." I met that man in the Electric on Portobello Road, and he's just outside this your door here. Is still my manager. That was in 2002.
And when you got that call, and when you obviously subsequently decided that you were going to work together, did you sort of run around the house screaming like a banshee? Did you have that childlike excitement?
No, it was that. I think at that stage, that's a really important cog in the whole mechanism, because in your mind the goal is still a record deal,
right?
So that now I've got a guy who's a guide.
It's not just any guy, is it? I mean, there's
absolutely, and he's working for Elton John. Yeah. Sure, there's a little bit. I'm sure. I'm very excited by that, but it's
I
not
still haven't got a record.
I still haven't got a record deal.
That's fair enough.
It's not the end goal.
No.
But it's of course. In fact, I haven't really thought about it for a long time.
No,
of course
I'm sure you haven't.
But yeah, you suddenly think, okay, I've got a real strong mechanism to head in the right direction in towards my goal. And
it's
then
a mission. You're on a mission.
Exactly.
Aren't you? Yes.
And then he had a path.
Yes.
Before I'm just this, guy aimlessly playing concerts and telling people, give me a record deal.
Yes.
And instead he says, no, look, here's a path. You write the songs and I'll work on a plan. And so we approached EMI Publishing for my songwriting. I got a publishing deal, kind of like an investment, a long-term investment. And that gives you fun. So then I could leave the army, and then I can look after myself. I can and then I can feed
so there was
myself.
no leap into the unknown.
Yeah, exactly.
Or rather, there was.
There was a crossover.
There was
So I left the army, and then I got the publishing deal about 6 months afterwards.
Okay, and what did your former comrades? I mean, some of them must have. Honestly, I know I keep coming back to this only because I find it fascinating. Some of them must have genuinely felt that you were going to smash it. And some of them must have felt you were absolutely bonkers.
Yeah. I think, your mates all want you to do well, and they go for you, and those who aren't your mates are a bit more cynical and probably more realistic as well, and say, yeah, fat chance, good luck to you.
And you end up in America. You get signed in Texas, I think.
So I got turned down by every UK record label. Understandably.
But you carry on. Why do you say understandably?
Well, I joke about it, obviously.
Yes, you always do.
But... Well, I mean, I think.
What would remind people what they were looking for at the time, at this era? What was getting signed?
I probably can't tell you. Who was around at the same time as me? Katie Tunstall was out there, but at the time I'm looking at, we've just come out of the 90s, haven't we? So we've had the Britpop era,
had the whole Britpop,
which is very much working class hero, and I'm a posh knob who also with this insane naivety.
Yes.
So, and that
but
naivety.
With some really, really beautiful songs under your belt.
Thank you. But as a person, I had come from a very protected background, and although I've worked with people from all corners of the earth, and people know me as a grounded human being, I'm still, we can. If you get me in an interview, they're still going to go, "Wow, this guy is from another era."
Okay.
And
more so then than now, perhaps. Actually, I
absolutely. And so looking back at that time, being rejected by those record labels, it was for a fair reason. There's no one else like you in the business, or if they are, they certainly tone down the accent or hide where they're from. Or
did you ever consider doing that?
I just couldn't pull it off.
No.
But I do write about it in the book, where literally in Virgin Records, which is my closest to getting a record deal in the UK, said, "Hey, we will sign you." I went in with Todd, my manager, and the senior manager from Elton's management firm, who was a broad Scots, and we went in. They said, "Great, here's the record deal. We love you. You're going to be a star." And then their marketing manager said, "We do have one issue with your speaking voice.
Yes.
Can you do another accent?" And I said, "I can. I can do Pakistani." At which stage, my Scottish manager said, "Let's get the hell out of here."
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
So anyway, I went over to America.
What would that have been? Hang on, I'd have a path not taken here. What would that have been like? At what point? I mean, it would have slipped in interviews, wouldn't it? You'd have had moments where the real accent came out. No, I don't mean doing a Pakistani accent. I
wouldn't have been able to pull that off.
No, it's because it's around about the time that Mockney was a thing, isn't it? And a lot of people were masking their
absolutely,
background
and actually, if you look at the music industry, there are a ton of people who've come from very privileged backgrounds.
Entirely full of them. Why was it so important to you? Why didn't you contemplate dropping a few consonants?
I just obviously couldn't pull it off enough. I slip into where I come from too easily, and they bust me like Escape from Colditz. Anyway, so I went to America, and I signed to Linda Perry, who is an amazing human being from the band Four Non Blondes.
Yes.
And as an American, didn't really care where I was
That's
from.
really interesting, isn't it? Because they're obsessed by our system and our hierarchies and our class, but actually, and they've got different types of problems and huge issues of privilege, but actually, it is a more level playing field in a way.
Yeah, and also then our music industry, often the songs that people sing are about their way of life and their background and where they come from, and mine, when I sing about that, aren't very catchy, but I was singing about things that are universal to any nationality, and that's probably why not only did I connect in America, but my biggest markets throughout Europe, where I'm singing things that they can basically understand and relate to,
and sing
because
along
it's
to
not
as well.
English centric.
Yes, of course. Which is in contrast to the whole Britpop thing that came just before. It is the universal songs. But I think the best songs are universal, really, aren't they? I mean, they should be.
Well, in many ways, yeah, absolutely. You know, and what I love about it, and I've realised about it now, looking back over the number of years, is, you know, that universality is rather wonderful. My audience is a mix of people of all generations, all you know, and all nationalities and religions, and both the sexes or more, depending on how many we can go for. And so it's a rather wonderful thing of, you know, politicians drive us apart, and instead I'm in a business which pulls people together.
Yes, you are. And there's another extraordinary moment now, isn't there? Because you decide to record the record in LA, the first record in LA, Back to Bedlam, and you end up living. I mean, there are double take moments, and the worst thing you could have done from the point of view of someone researching an interview is write a book called Loosely Based on a Made Up Story, and then pepper it with truly unbelievable things that are true, and things that might not be true that aren't as shocking as the things that are, because you end up living with Carrie Fisher in Los Angeles. Mind-blowing
to be living with her. Well, the book's called Loosely Based on a Made Up Story, but it's actually entirely true.
Yes.
I'm talking about 99% of it's true. There's only maybe one moment.
Very loosely based.
Yes.
Yes. The made up bit is very loose.
The made up bit is very obviously not made up because, exactly. We won't go into it here. But yeah, I mean, how extraordinary to find yourself living with Carrie Fisher. And at that stage, that's going to really make you believe you can achieve anything.
What did she like about you?
I think we were both very... Well, you know what? First of all, she's a very generous human being.
Yes. She adopted people, didn't she, a bit?
Basically, yes. Particularly, you know, those... She was a drug addict herself, and she was very open about that, and people with drug addictions she would invite in and care for and look after. With me, when we met, she said, you know, what do you do, and where you know, what's your life all about? And I said, I've left the army, got a record deal, moving to Los Angeles. She asked me where I was going to live, and I said, I haven't organised that yet. And she literally said, come and live with me. For the first month, we didn't really speak.
Right.
I was just out in the studio, and I'd come back late at night, and I never really saw her. And then she had an episode. She's a manic depressive, and she had a bipolar, and she had an absolute episode. They were talking about her. Her staff were talking about her in front of her. And it was a bizarre moment to watch and uncomfortable. But suddenly seeing her have this episode, I could really relate to what was going on in her brain. And suddenly that openness between her and myself, became apparent, and we just found we could talk for hours.
Proper intimacy.
Absolutely.
Had
and
you
from
had
completely
that before?
different backgrounds.
Had you?
Not really.
No.
I mean, I suppose maybe with, you know, your mate when you're 14 and you have a dream and you're going to, you know, and form a band and you're going to be, but those are such childish ambitions and dreams, and that's why you have those intense friendships as children.
Yes, sure.
But it was amazing to be an adult and have that intensity of conversation with someone as well, so open.
And someone who'd lived so much, when in a sense you'd lived a lot, but you were starting a new life at this point.
Absolutely. And to therefore be so open as to not be afraid to say the things that you shouldn't say to anyone else. You know, the things you're genuinely most embarrassed about. Yeah. The things you know, just the things that you just wouldn't share with anyone. They're your private thoughts. And I write about it in the book, saying, you know, where she knows where every body is buried. In that she really did. I mean, we were very, very open.
Because you'd seen her naked.
Yeah,
emotionally.
Exactly.
You felt you could bear yourself to her.
The shame and humiliation with which she had to deal with having a sort of breakdown in front of other people and them talking about her, we just felt we could be very open.
She left a huge hole in your life, I think.
Yeah, and as you say, in many others. It's funny bumping into other people who will talk as passionately about her as I do.
You've gone as far as to describe it as your greatest sadness, I think. Losing her. And you wrote in her house. You wrote during that period.
I mean, it was extraordinary. I was there playing on Paul Simon's grand piano, writing, you know, the skeletons to "Goodbye, My Lover," recording in her bathroom. It's just an extraordinary way of life. To have left the army and find myself there was. And
it's happened very quickly, hasn't it? You signed, I think, with Custard in 2003, and you're now.
By the end of the year,
and then
living with her.
Yes, and the album was out by the end of 2004.
Yeah,
on both sides of the Atlantic at the same time, did it?
I think so.
Right.
I mean, maybe you definitely hit in Europe first, but because then when we licensed it out in the UK, but then things caught here in the UK and then in Europe, and then the Americans caught it after us.
What was that like? I mean, you must have been pleased with the album. You must have been very pleased with Back to Bedlam. The people around you must have been delighted with it. But then it's out of your control completely. You throw it out into the world and see what happens.
Well, you do a bit, but you also go and work it. I mean, actually, you go and promote it. And I worked it insanely hard around the world, but it was exciting. And this thing just started lifting. It was a slow start.
Yes.
And record labels often count first week sales.
Right.
That's the thing we're all, where did it chart on its first week is what we kind of are most intrigued by. That's what they judge their numbers by, the bottom line. And I didn't know many people who were going to buy my album on the first week, so I was saying to the record label, please can you not count first week sales?
Yes.
Because I've only got 50 mates, and that's an exaggeration at that.
Hang on, you've got 30,000 troops.
So can we not, hope that my 50 mates buy it, and then hope that by the second week they've told their friends that it's worth getting, and work out second week sales and potentially third week. So we put out a song called High and got some radio play, and that was, and that felt good. And then we did a song called Wise Men, and it got the album into the top 20.
Right.
But then we knew we were going to go with the best shot we had, You're Beautiful. That was the next big thing. And I knew that, if this doesn't do anything, we're probably not going to go much further. But the opposite happened. And
how quickly did it happen?
I mean, we put the album out, the song out.
Third track off the album.
Third single, You're Beautiful, out. And it was something like 12 weeks. So it was it grew and it grew and it grew into the monster that we all now know and
love.
And love.
And anyone who says otherwise is lying.
You're sweet, thank you.
Well, it's true. And the point at which it moved from hit to monster for you, was that a moment where you thought, fucking hell?
Absolutely. Well, when I got the phone call from my radio rep at the record label, who said it's number one as a single and it's number one as an album and Coldplay at number 2, and I felt terror.
Yes, you said that.
I felt absolute terror at that stage. I really thought, I'm a guy who's... as I say, I've said it before in here, but I'm a smaller man. I enjoy the notion of hiding. I'm a reconnaissance officer. Yeah. I'm good at being a reconnaissance officer because I can hide and be not seen. My song is about stalking someone. I'm the guy who's invisible. And suddenly I'm at number 1, and number 2 would have been great. But number 1 is taking you to a level which I wasn't ready for. And
you said you stopped being a musician and you become a celebrity.
Exactly that. And I found that very frightening. And I walked up and down the hotel room just swearing, just going, fuck.
Oh, gosh.
And then, then the band turn up and we all have think this is great and pull out the champagne. And I was supporting Jamiroquai that night, and he was pissed off that the support act was at number 1, and we, and life turned into the biggest and best party it ever could, and still is.
And still is. And yet there's still another path not taken, isn't there, where you would be spared some of the what I suppose is called the backlash, because it was the scale of the success. It had nothing to do with the song or you. It was the scale of the success plus small portions of the other 2 things that then prompted some of the unpleasantness that followed.
And it did happen very quickly.
Yes.
I think that was...
Because the success was so bloody enormous.
Yeah, and I think, if I were to do my time again, I would ask the nation, hey, just give me 6 more months of unadulterated fun before you have a go at me. And then do your worst.
Yeah.
Because as I was starting to go on this absolute crest of a wave and thinking everything I'd ever dreamt of has arrived, and this is incredible fun, the negativity came very quickly, and it came very, very harshly. And it was a surprise, and there was a little bit of sadness there.
Where did it come from?
Well, as you say, the song was a monster hit. And I think, in the business, I was susceptible to that. I talk about the naivety being useful at the beginning.
Yes.
And I think that naivety wasn't so useful in that respect. And I'm just not the hard-nosed tough guy that some people are in the business who can bat that off, and instead I was just this, as I say, I go back to the posh idiot.
Yes, but you're not. I mean, you are quite posh, but you're clearly not an idiot, and your music was incredibly popular. So when I say where did it come from, I sort of mean it's not coming from the traditional measures of success. your people like your music. And
I guess, yeah.
NME were quite up themselves at that point. They're
very much.
Quite an easy target in that
The industry is based on not just music.
Yes.
The industry is based on what's hip and cool.
Yes.
And that perception is what the record label try and build up.
Right.
Is that we write our music, we put out our music, but they have to market the music, and the marketing is about something that doesn't really exist. It's smoke and mirrors, and what is hip and of the moment and of the now and cool is really important within the music business. And I never fell into that bracket. So
which is largely why you're still here, actually.
Potentially so, because
it goes both ways.
Because there's a reality to what I'm singing.
Yes.
I'm singing honestly, and there's no it's real in all its painfulness.
It was desperately unfair what happened to you, and I presume the hardest bit of it was other musicians queuing up to give you a hard time.
Yeah. I mean, Paul McCartney was being very, very kind. He was saying very nice things. Damon, and Damon Albarn was not. What would you prefer? And the Gallaghers, well, that's their bread and butter. That's what they do. If they're having a go at you, you're actually doing something right.
Surprising when politicians got involved as well. You had a row with Chris Bryant, didn't you, at one point, I think? Because he said something quite unfair, and I'm a big fan of Chris Bryant. He sat in that chair.
And he and I have met, and we get on.
I thought you would have done. Because he thought you'd had it easy. And as you point out, there are advantages to your kind of background, but writing hit records isn't really one of them.
Yeah. But also, I just don't think you can remove us from an industry based on us. He was saying me and my ilk. I don't think you can remove us because we've come from a particular background. It would, yeah. So that's why he and I had a fracas.
A fracas. It was one of your sort of early interventions, and now, I mean, you keep selling records, don't you? You never stop selling records. The problem you've got, of course, with something as big as Back to Bedlam is that the second album is almost certain not to do quite as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was struggling with Stocking Great Backlash, and I was very lucky that album did sell fortunately in its millions as well. But it's been a graceful downwards trajectory since Back to Bedlam, definitely. But at the same time, I seem to have been lucky enough that people are turning up to my shows, and I'm just about to go on a tour, and we're playing, the UK arenas and European arenas, and those are healthy-sized crowds, and so I feel very lucky to still be in with that. And you know what? When I'm playing my shows, I'm going to give them a healthy dose of Back to Bedlam.
Yes.
I'll give 4 songs of that, and I know you don't want to hear just all of the new album.
No.
I'm going to give you the songs that you know.
But you are constantly writing. The new album, I think, came out in October, Who We Used to Be, and again, it's got some, truly beautiful, beautiful songs on it. You were contemplative at the beginning, but you were almost writing songs, I don't know, perhaps with a little more distance than you do now. The songs you write now have, they're very much you. They're very personal. As you say, you're beautiful. I presume you weren't ever actually a stalker, so you're imagining
the girl in the underground.
Up to a point.
She exists.
Yes, but you wouldn't have followed her. Beyond that encounter.
Not arrestable. I'm not an arrestable.
Yes,
human
I just
being.
wanted to clear that up. But now
absolutely.
you write.
And when I talk about Carrie knowing the where the shallow graves are,
yes.
I promise they're not real graves
they're not literal,
either. They're not.
No, but
apart from them, yeah.
So as long as you're thinking,
I buried a mannequin once, but in a wedding dress as well. But other than that, there are no actual humans.
As long as you are thinking and feeling, you are writing songs.
Absolutely, and it's my way of processing things. And on this album, we're of an age, you and I, aren't we? Where suddenly we know what we're going to be. The first album I was writing about who I might be, the questions of where I might get to. Now you and I sort of know what our role in life is, and that gives us a whole load of other questions as to is this it? And so I am now inspired.
But you're content, I think.
Yeah, and the album is full of celebration.
But it also grapples with loss and
yeah,
and an interesting song about a friend who you feel has given up.
Yeah,
this is "I Won't Die With You," isn't it? Which is
I think you again. I'm saying you and I because I wonder if you feel the same way. But at an age, people suddenly think that that life is over. There is nothing yet to achieve,
yes.
nothing to go on to, no ambition, that they've settled. You know, the notion of settling
yes.
is a question that is often asked of us, isn't it? When are you going to settle down?
Yeah.
And, you know, are you going to get married and settle and have children? And for me, I have done all those things, but none of that is settling down. You know, I've met...
Well, you've actually got a job.
Yeah, but I've also met someone who's, you know, works at a faster speed than me, that I've had to match her speed, that it's not settling down, it's matching her speed, and life is exciting for taking. And so, yeah, my song is about my friend who doesn't have that excitement for life anymore. No. And there are still a few things to be done in life, and there's still things to wake up for.
You talk about family. You sing a little bit about quite a lot about some of the elements of it. Going out on tour, as we alluded to quite near the beginning, with a young family, is a very different proposition to going out on tour with no family at all.
Very much so. I mean, as I wrote in the book, 3 of my bandmates have married girls from the audience. That was a different way of life back then.
Yes.
And so, and now, yeah, we have a tour bus is a kind of double-decker bus, and you have a downstairs bit with a sitting room, and a little bar that seems to never run out of beer or vodka, amazingly. And then an upstairs sitting room, and then the 16 bunks are upstairs as well. But that back lounge, as it's called, is where we have our parties, and that's where all kinds of wonderful and rock and roll things, even in my kind of music, have gone on. Until I've had children, obviously, and now there's a travel cot in there, and I've got a baby monitor around my neck. And it's a slightly different vibe.
But you're still the leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've talked about touring being very similar to being in the army again. You know, I am the slightly clueless officer saying, "Let's go off to Beirut, shall we now?" And I have a tour manager who is like the sergeant major who says, "That's a bad idea, sir. But if we must, let me teach you or show you how we should be doing it." And a crew and a band who make up that unit. And my tank now is bigger and more comfortable than it is a tour bus.
And are you conscious of the responsibility that you have for everyone else on it in the way that you were when you were in the army?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, they're all self-employed, but absolutely when we hit a time of COVID, for instance, and we were supposed to be on tour for a year, and then suddenly they've got potentially all of that tour has gone away, then I know it's my job to at least chip in, contribute, help, and we do talk about, you know, how we're going to be, how we're going to look after each other long term. My guitar technician, a wonderful Scotsman, who from Glasgow, when we tour the world, I have to translate for him to the local people. But you know, if he wasn't on my tour, I wouldn't much want to tour without him. He's an amazing human being.
Yes.
Next tour, we're going to buy him a mobility scooter to bring on my guitar. He's reaching that age. But we are very much a family. And these are guys I've been with for 2 decades,
and will continue to be with. I think you've got. I mean, you again, as I say, if you're thinking and feeling, you're writing songs, and if you're writing songs, you want to perform them to people.
Absolutely,
that's a huge part for you, isn't it? The performance element of it.
There is an amazing feeling. It's an amazing thing to stand up on a stage in front of thousands of people and just open up. And it's not about the screams and cheers or the oversized knickers that my mates are throwing on. It really is about standing there and opening up about, you know, I sing songs about, as I say, not about my fast car or my expensive watch. I have neither. I'm singing about my frailties, my weaknesses, my fears, what it is to be human. You know, on this album, as you say, about loss, whether it be of a friend, of something closer to home. To reveal yourself is something that humans don't often do, or at least maybe not from where I come from.
No.
We don't, you know, in this interview, as you say, I bat off a lot with humour, but on a stage I really open up to who I am.
Yes, it's a fascinating dichotomy. Is it the closest you come to therapy?
Very much so. I've talked about that. Absolutely. I don't need therapy, because I have my moments. You know, we have light therapy here, you and I
guess so.
And then deeper therapy on a talking to the spotlight.
What was it? So tell me about the very first time you played to an enormous audience, if you can remember.
Well, it wasn't my show. It was an Elton John concert, and I was the support act. It was the second concert I'd ever played with a band. The first concert had been the night before to 50 people, and then we stepped out in front of 50,000 people at Ipswich Football Stadium. And actually what's quite funny is the support act, you're told 50,000, and obviously They're only a third of the people there, a quarter of the people
they're
there
still
even
coming,
as well.
they're still trooping
I've
in.
recently seen pictures of it, and I always had 50,000 people, and then you see the photo, and they're mostly empty seats. Slightly breaks the bubble. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And then you start to learn. You've got to learn how to perform into that number and how to connect to the person at the back, and that's a whole new skill.
And yeah, you've played the main stage at Glastonbury twice, I think. I mean, you've hit your marks, haven't you?
Yeah, and I've always said that was the most amazing thing in the world. That's a dream come true to play Glastonbury on the Pyramid stages. It doesn't get better than that.
Are there any dreams left?
Yeah, absolutely, genuinely.
What?
Wembley Stadium.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I wouldn't bet against it.
I don't have the naivety that I had.
No. Okay.
And do you know what? And that's why it won't happen. But it's there.
It's still there.
It's
not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. Come on, one day.
And you've got various sort of side hustles as well. You've got a pub.
I have a pub which you're very welcome to, called the Fox and Pheasant, which I've just come from. I now do meetings in the pub.
That's nice.
Which is great.
And you have become a phenomenon on social media, haven't you? How did that happen? For people who don't know, and I'm sure they do, you've written a book about this as well, haven't you? In fact,
yeah.
But you've got a peculiar knack for.
I think it was entirely natural because
Yes.
I was going through this major backlash, and whenever it was media led, it was journalists on the whole, and you know, at the end of my book, you'll see I just put in the negative stories,
Yes,
and they're really petty. I mean, insanely childish for national newspapers.
I can tell because I was a showbiz journalist for a while, although I never got involved in any of that. And I'm sure you've worked this out for yourself, but you forget that you're talking about human beings.
Exactly that. And so whilst this is going on, I also had no voice. And I wanted to, when I'd say we should, I don't know, how do we reply to this? I'd say it to my record label and have a publicist who deals with the press, and I want to reply, and they say no comment, or also there's no real means of reply in that to newspapers. I don't have a newspaper to write in. Hadn't buttered up any oligarchs at that stage. But then they invented Twitter, and suddenly I had a genuine real-time voice to answer back. And whilst the record label said, "Hey, will you just promote your music?" I thought, well, that's boring. But I can simply reply now, and it was just such a freedom just to have, and it wasn't just about answering back. It was just really saying who I am.
Yes.
Because I would say a joke in an interview in the newspaper, they didn't repeat the joke.
Right.
They'd take the ha-ha out of it. So when they asked me in one award ceremony, what do you think about the people being so negative about You're Beautiful? I'd say, pity me, I'm the poor bastard who has to sing it every day.
Yeah.
And the headline in whatever newspaper it was Blunt says, these bastards who listen to it. And you hang on, I didn't say that. You've taken my joke out, and it was a joke. So Twitter just gave me my voice back, and I could reply in the silly way that I am, and I wasn't angry or aggressive. I would just laugh at the whole thing and laugh at myself for reading the articles in the first place, and for them for being quite so petty, and it gave a voice and it was a release and a relief.
And quite a big deal, actually, even though it's so ephemeral and disposable. The way that you've just described it actually makes it sound quite important. It really did give you an outlet that you wouldn't, or not even an outlet, is it? It's a right of reply that you wouldn't otherwise have had.
Absolutely, it was very frustrating not having that.
Yes.
And it was a joy to have. And you know what? Just to be able to say, if someone calls you an arsehole, if you've got tape over your mouth, it's frustrating.
Yes.
Take the tape off, and you can come back at them. It's just, and there were big moments when you're reading a national newspaper where it's absolutely demolishing you as a human being, the shame you feel from that your mates are going to read it too, and that your prospective girlfriend is going to read it too. They're painful not being able to in some way deal with it, and so at least with a reply I found my voice, and then it changed people's perspective or perception of me. They saw that I wasn't just this earnest human being writing these overly emotive songs that you think, oh God, James, stop it with the violin. And they saw that actually there was a more light-hearted human being too.
More than that, and exceptionally funny. I mean, some of them are madly good. Did you know when you've dropped ones, you go, that's fucking gold.
I have a really basic litmus test,
Yes.
which is I write the draft.
Yes.
And normally in my life, I either have my manager standing near me or I have my wife.
Yes.
I will show either of them, whoever's in the room, and if they wince in pain or say no, that's when I press send.
That's the nod. The wince.
Exactly.
The wince is the nod. You're on tour from the end of March. I think you start in Leeds. All the tickets are on sale at jamesblunt.com and loosely based on a made-up story, which is it's a unique book, really. Can you follow it?
No.
No,
I think I only wrote the one book.
Yes.
But it's it's told all the stories that I have, and it's got its serious moments as well.
Crikey, yes.
And the madness. It's the madness of the music industry.
I sense you're a happy man, James Blunt.
Yeah, very lucky.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel it's been much more about me than it has been about you.
Well, that's the general idea in interviews.
So thank you for that.
So, it was a real pleasure. Thank you.